Hello and welcome to Choice and Chance Tabletop Role-Playing Games. My name is Chuck. This is a channel related to all tabletop role-playing systems, D&D, Pathfinder, retro clones, and the like, generally with a more of an old school lens. There's a video about my biases and the way I view the game that you can go look at if you don't want to listen to somebody talk who you don't have a similar opinion to. But honestly, if I would love to have a discussion about why I'm wrong in the comments if you feel that way after this video. So this video is about what I think is most important about running tabletop role-playing games. And I did, believe it or not, actually get asked this question in real life. As bizarre as that is, one of my friends is going to start running games, and they're like, "What's the most important thing?" Like they weren't asking me a big existential question, the way that most of us who are game masters might interpret it. But really, he was just like, "No, like I need to know what the thing I need to focus on the most is." And of course, I gave him a terrible answer. My answer was player engagement or player buy-in. And of course, if it's your first time running a game, don't worry about player engagement first and foremost. I mean, design your game to encourage player engagement, but worry about the details of the system you're running, the pacing, the structure. I'll make a video about what I think is important for starting out at some point. Why not? I have a take on that. But player engagement or player buy-in, I would define as thus. The player's ability to suspend their disbelief. The player's ability to invest their emotional and intellectual energy into the game with the feeling that energy is respected, and that the experience is valid and producing something as a result of chance and, their decisions rather than the game masters waving their fingers. And the belief that the game master is respecting and beholden to the rules and the consequences of the game in a similar manner to the players, and that the game master is not a dick. Player engagement to me is largely predicated on the belief that your players don't think you're trying to screw them over. Now, some people enjoy adversarial game styles. I won't go into this too much because I fundamentally disagree. I think that tabletop role-playing games with the information imbalance, the nature of dice-based conflict resolution are strictly a poor medium for adversarial game styles. Now, if somebody can tell me how they have a great time running adversarially, I'm more than welcome to hearing it. Personal opinion and through some personal experience when I first started running games, it's not for me. So that's a lot to wrap into player engagement, right? And if you asked a player what makes them feel engaged, that would be a pretty unlikely answer. And I think that's because when you ask players what makes them feel engaged, their answer is likely situations that they enjoyed engaging with, rather than the factors that facilitated the ability for them to engage, right? Like, it's what you're going to ask is like, oh, like what helps you engage with the game? They'll be like, well, I really like this encounter and I really like this, none of my players sound like that. But you know what I mean? Like, I really like this specific encounter, I really like this specific session or this specific campaign, this specific character I was running. But when I'm looking for engagement, what I'm looking for is the factors, like the larger, broader factors of the way that the session is run, the way the game is constructed, that allow player engagement, rather than specific things they enjoyed engaging with. It's kind of like a hard question to get the answer you want to, and a lot of it is about interpreting information that will not be directly reported to you, which is a good social exercise. Definitely strengthens your personal or emotional intelligence to try and infer what's allowing somebody to enjoy themselves rather than what it is that they're directly enjoying. Good exercise for being a human being. Like tabletop role-playing games are. But before I digress too much, I want to talk about three big things in this video that are very easy to implement into a game and not large style changes. And these things are very powerful sort of engagement magnets. They, in my experience, for me, these things, I implemented them, and all of a sudden, I must have gotten way better at everything I was doing, and all of a sudden, all my, NPCs are super memorable, and my role-playing is amazing. It's like, and my combat encounters are insane. It's like, no, these changes made the players more capable of investing their energy in the game. And the first one that I'll start with is rolling in the open. Now, I talked about fudging dice in my biases video, and I won't get too much into fudging dice here. My opinion is that fudging dice is bad. Don't do it. Rolling in the open builds trust. It silences this subconscious voice. Now, all players, all people, in basically all situations, social or otherwise, have a skeptical gremlin voice in their head that's suspicious of people that they don't know very well or people they don't trust, of certain situations. And for some people, this voice is louder. For some people, this voice is quieter. But in general, it needs to be addressed in the confines of a story-based tabletop role-playing game where there's a information power imbalance. And what will happen is when you obfuscate a roll as a game master and you hide it behind your screen or roll it hidden online or however you play, there's a little voice in your player's head that goes, "Oh, come on. He's going to fudge that dice. He doesn't want you to succeed. He's a cheetah. He's a cheetah. He's trash." And that voice most players can ignore. Largely they can ignore it. They might hear it or they might think it for a moment. They have the shadow of a doubt, but they can ignore it. And you'd think that would be fine, but I don't want my players spending any energy, subconscious or otherwise, ignoring that voice. I want them to completely have that voice with no gas. So they see the dice, they know what the number is. We're all playing the same game. And you sort of diminish the power imbalance. You give the players feel like they have more agency, and like overnight, instantly, huge quality improvement in the game. Highly recommend it. I know some people, of course, from more narrative circles or hilariously from super grognardian circles will say that this is not necessary to do and that total unbeholden faith in the game master is absolutely necessary for the game to function. And it's just not a human thing. That's not a human thing to do. People are naturally skeptical, especially of, it's like the oldest thing in the book to cheat at a dice game. And I don't want that old skeptical voice chatting my players' heads while I'm trying to run a game. So rolling in the open. The next thing, which is very in tandem with rolling in the open and sort of addresses the same skeptical gremlin, is being clear about DCs. Now, when I say clear about DCs, I do not mean that I give a handout at the beginning of every session with every save, every check, every monster AC in the entire area of the hex crawl my players are in, or anything like that. After a player commits to doing something, but before they roll the dice, I will tell them the target number. And this does a number of things. One, it brings more eyes to that die roll. Whether it's the player rolling it or other players at the table, when they don't have to wait for me to interpret the outcome, they will be more focused on the roll of the dice. This is not, you can have a great relationship with your players. Everybody's tired at the end of the day. Usually when we're playing anyway, with my group, we play generally on weeknights. And I don't expect my players to be paying complete attention 100% of the time. It's just unrealistic. But when there's something that naturally happens in your mind when you can get the outcome sooner, you'll be paying attention to whatever is going to deliver that information to you. And in this context, they don't need to wait for me. They can see the dice. They know what number is needed. So they'll know if there's success or failure before I even speak. And that draws attention. So that's a little thing. But also this builds a lot of trust. It eliminates the thought of a rug pull or a goalpost move. They know what they need to make the save. They're not worried that number is going to get changed. They're just thinking about rolling the number, right? All the intensity is on the dice, and the dice get to shine. It's like it's putting the spotlight of the game on the dice, if you will. There's like player spotlight and GM spotlight in the new school heroic narrative circles, and I think the spotlight does exist. I think that is a good term that obviously is minimized in old school games, but it's still a valid thing. It still exists. And when you inform players of the target number, of course, after they've committed, you don't want to create a situation where you're playing tug of war with information where you tell them the number and they're like, oh, it's too high, I won't do it. You really do want to be like, okay, so you're for sure going to do the check. All right, this is the number you need. And I do the same thing with monster ACs. Of course, this implies that combat has begun, not that they're not looking at the monster and guessing its AC or anything like that. And I do the same thing with monster to hit bonuses, monster saves. when the monster is attacking, I will, the bonus is known, so the number cannot be changed. It just, again, much like rolling in the open, brings the power imbalance down. Players feel like they're playing the same game. Players feel like it's real, and none of your players might not directly be able to tell you that this is increasing their ability to engage with the game, but in my albeit anecdotal experience, it's a huge thing. And lastly, I want to talk about telegraphing danger. Now, this is something that I slightly touched on when I talked about how lethal of a game that I run in my last video, but I think that it's a critical part of player engagement, and not just danger, but rather the stakes of the scenario. So players will feel like they have more agency when they understand the stakes of a situation, regardless if it's, their social reputation, they stand to lose money in the game, they stand to get lost, or it's, a dangerous situation where their player character might be destroyed. Knowing the stakes encourages player agency enormously, because when they take a risk, they're aware of the stakes of the risk. They feel more engaged and more in control of the risk they're taking, and they feel more able to invest mental energy and intellectual energy in planning, dealing with situations when they have a rough idea of the outcomes. Now, I'm not saying exactly know the outcomes, and this is where the art of it comes in, and this is the difficult part, and this is the hardest thing out of the three to quickly implement into your game, because telegraphing the stakes of the situation without outright breaking the fourth wall is a skill. It's an information presentation skill. It takes honing. You can make mistakes. Granted, if I feel like I've screwed up in communicating the stakes of a situation, I will hit the panic button, break the fourth wall, and be like, just so you guys know, this is insanely dangerous. Because I owe that to the players. I haven't done a good enough job at painting the situation. Ultimately, it's on me to give them the information they need to make decisions. And if I feel like their characters would know the stakes, then I think the players should know the stakes. And that's the general rule I use. Again, I try to very, very seldomly actually break the fourth wall and establish the danger of a situation. But I do it when necessary, because I feel like it's necessary for the trust of the players and for them to feel like they can take risks. And, because a lot of people don't talk about how bad for the momentum of the game it is for a player character to die. And I think it gets sort of thrown out the window by the old school people, because they're just like, well, it's just a natural part of the game, just get a new sheet. And new school gamers, like, they don't really deal with death in the same way in their games, so it's they don't really have an opinion. But the thing about it is yes, when a low level character is eliminated, of course it's not as stark chopping of the momentum of the session. But when you're into mid-level play, you have characters that have existed for 15, 20, 30 sessions. That's a huge amount of progress that's getting lost, regardless of whatever methods or mechanics you have for, introducing a new character with, up to the level of the party, or however you do that, whatever you do. If you have a system like that. I mean, I personally am kind of in the middle on that. If a player character dies, I generally give them, a character that has somewhat of a, is not level 1, right? Like has some experience, but, it's still rough. Like, it's rough when you die when you're further into the game. And I think that not taking that seriously, and, the loss, like the loss that the player feels is commensurate to the, positive experiences that they've had playing the character. Like, if you have a really great time playing the character and you lose them, like, it's going to hurt a lot more than if you didn't care at all. But I think that there is something to be said for, really taking a player's character seriously and doing your best to inform them, and, taking the time to mourn, in the game and outside of the game when some unfortunate stuff happens. So these are things that I've done that I think have noticeably, to me, pumped up my player engagement, made my games way more fun. For me, mostly, because, I'm a GM. It's like all I can gauge is, like, my experience. Ultimately, player engagement is a choice. These are tools that you can use to make it easier to make that choice for your players and to enable them to invest emotional and intellectual energy at the end of a long day. We only get so many hours to play D&D, and it takes energy to do. And these are some tools that I've used. A lot of it does have to do with the general game philosophy of fairness. Not a balanced game, but a fair game. You don't want to be worried about mechanical balance. You want to be worried about fairness in the distribution of information and the presentation of situations, so that you're not, being a jerk. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Let me know how I'm wrong or how you agree, or if any of these things work or don't work for you if you implement them in your games, and if you have a hack for player engagement or player investment. Hit me up. I could probably make another whole video on this because there's so many smaller things you can do, systems in the game that you can implement to help players engage. But we'll see. We'll see if that ends up getting made. Thank you guys for watching. As always, good luck in your games, and I'll see you next time.